Hello friends and subscribers, welcome back to another edition of Readings in Impact Investing. My name is Daniel Rosehill. This is a podcast which takes written material in the field of impact investing and development finance and makes it available in the format of audio so that you can listen to it instead of read it while you are doing whatever works for you in life. The website is readingsinimpact.org. That's where you can find this online. At that link, you get a link to various podcatching apps, as well as to the YouTube channel. So this initiative, this podcast, duplicates onto YouTube, and it magically transforms this podcast for me into videos, although all that happens in the videos is there is a background image. But if you prefer not to mess around with these podcasting apps and just use YouTube, then go ahead and subscribe on there, and you should also get the episode notified. So today we're going to be looking at the results-based financing description from GPRBA. The last episode covered, I have to apologize at the outset for the honking in the background. It is tremendously irritating. I unfortunately do not yet have a soundproof studio. That would be my absolute dream in life, would be, if not soundproofing, at least acoustic windows. And I live in the city centre. So at certain hours of the day, people just honk as a form of anger relief. So excuse that if you can hear it. Results-based financing, we're going to be looking at, again, the GPRBA, Global Partnership for Results-Based Approaches, supported by the World Bank Group. So I made the point in the last episode that I feel like there's a little bit of overlap between two terminologies we're using in Impact. One is called Pay for Success, PFS. The idea being that government money goes to paying for demonstrated outcomes instead of inputs. And then there's results-based financing that's kind of, from what I understand, actually like an older term in the space of development finance. And on this page of the GPRBA site, they list what they call results-based approaches, and impact bonds are one of those, and they tried to highlight the differences. So I thought this would be a great one to read so that people can join me in educating myself about what are these RBF approaches. So this is RBF approaches. Okay, number one is output-based aid. That is OBA. Output-based aid is a form of RBF designed to deliver access to infrastructure and social services for the poor. Service delivery is contracted to a third party, public or private, that receives a subsidy to complement or replace the required user contribution. So let me just read that again, because I think it's very important to understand the details of all these differences between these different instruments. Output-based aid is a form of RBF designed to deliver access to infrastructure and social services for the poor. Service delivery is contracted to a third party, public or private, that receives a subsidy to complement or replace the required user contribution. The service provider is responsible for pre-financing the project and is reimbursed after the services have been delivered and independently verified. So we're seeing across these different instruments, because this is something we see in the SIB and DIB model, that ideally there is an independent verification agent. That's quite common in these innovative social and development finance approaches. Ideally that there should be independent verification of these outcomes. OBA has been successfully demonstrated in most infrastructure sectors as well as in social sectors. A key task in an OBA program is appropriately defining outputs that balance results with reasonable transfer of performance risk, which include the ability of households to pay for a service over time and the ability of the utility to provide consistent services. OBA programs deliver access to basic infrastructure or social services for low-income areas or poor communities. They offer payments to cover the difference between what users can afford and what is required. They make the service provider responsible for pre-financing the project. They include independent verification to verify results, and they have been successfully demonstrated in most infrastructure sectors as well as social sectors. Moving on to impact bonds. This is more familiar territory, at least for me. Impact bonds include social impact bonds and development impact bonds, SIBs and DIBs. As a reminder, the outcomes payer in a SIB is the government, or a government agency typically, and in development impact bonds, it is frequently a multilateral, so something, it could be like a DFI, for instance. And another way that people differentiate SIBs and DIBs is that in a SIB, all the parties are typically in one country. You have a social delivery program in one country, the government's paying for it, and probably local investors, although not necessarily the impact investors. But in a DIB, you might have the social program in country A, but the outcomes payer might be, let's say, a DFI in country B. So that's another common way that people distinguish between the two. The difference between impact bonds and traditional results-based financing is the role of the funding, which is typically from the private sector and or philanthropic institutions. So let me just read that one again. The difference between impact bonds and traditional RBF is the role of the funding, which is typically from the private sector, and this is an impact bonds, and or philanthropic institutions. Sorry, this is an RBF. With the funding. Financing is provided upfront to the service providers with the promise of a return once results are achieved and verified. The difference between a social impact bond or SIB and a DIB depends on who pays for the outcomes. This is kind of just what I talked about a minute ago. In a SIB, the outcome payer is a government. In a DIB, the outcome payer is a donor. SIBs and DIBs have been implemented in education, global health, and workforce development. Impact bonds focus the allocation of funds to social programs or development issues. Unlike other forms of RBF, they use funding from private sector for upfront financing with the promise of a return. And they address social issues such as providing high-quality preschool education, reducing prison recidivism, avoiding foster care placement, and increasing youth employment. But the amount of the picture of what impact bonds do is varying. It continues to vary as new outcomes bonds are developed. So I'm pretty sure there have been outcomes bonds targeting some environmental objectives, although I don't know that for a fact. If you do know and you'd like to contribute to the discussion, please leave a comment or reach out to me. public@danielrosehill.com is a way that will reach me. Okay, next, let's move on to the next one. Program for results. P4R. That's the acronym, P4R. The World Bank introduced a lending instrument called the Program for Results Financing, P4R, in 2012. In P4R projects, disbursements to client country governments are linked to their achievement of particular milestones or disbursement-linked indicators called DLIs that are tangible, transparent, and verifiable. DLIs play a critical role in P4R operations, providing the government's incentive to achieve key program milestones and improve performance. Each DLI is defined and agreed upon by the country in consultation with the World Bank and has a verification protocol setting out how it will be measured and verified. Disbursements are specified for each DLI and will be made according to DLIs achieved. So the World Bank's P4R instrument links disbursements to achievement of particular milestones, or what they call disbursement-linked indicators, DLIs. They require robust verification prior to disbursement, and they help countries strengthen institutions, build capacity, and enhance partnerships. And there is a link here to the Programs for Results Financing page on the World Bank website, which was updated, I see, in October 2023. So this is still a relevant program. Okay, results-based climate financing. So now we move on to something that is thematic, and this is another acronym. This is RBCF. So results-based climate financing, RBCF, is a type of RBF wherein payments are made for climate mitigation or adaptation results after they have been achieved and independently verified. A popular RBCF instrument is carbon finance, which makes payments upon the achievement of a specific climate mitigation action. Carbon finance projects involve contracts to purchase greenhouse gas emission reductions, like a commercial transaction, paying for them annually or periodically once they have been verified by a third-party auditor. Carbon financing projects have proven results in decreasing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing energy efficiency. In projects that have an energy efficiency component, municipalities receive revenues from the sale of certified emission reductions, from the reduction of CO2 emissions, representing the predefined outcomes. Carbon financing makes payments upon achievement of a specified climate mitigation action, involves contracts to purchase emission reductions, and pays annually or periodically once emission reductions have been verified by a third party. So the difference, if I can interject with a comment for a second here, is that impact bonds are instruments that bring the private capital into play for and they're paid for success. So that's, as I mentioned, I think at the start here, PFS versus RBF, pay for success versus results-based financing. The distinction is often whether for-profit capital is involved. In SIBs and DIBs, impact bonds, it's a mechanism that we can bring together for-profit capital and philanthropic capital. And these other approaches, outcome-based aid and P4R and results-based financing, involve pay for success applied to grant capital, philanthropic capital in these economies, in development aid, I should say. Outcomes-based disbursement, OBD. Outcomes-based disbursement is a form of RBF where a payment is made to a service provider or contractor for improvements in the efficiency of a service-related asset system or recurrent government activity. Some of these programs link service outputs with associated unit costs, and disbursements reflect the actual cost of service. These types of programs typically secure pre-finance from their local government, since the activities are in line with the national development plans, and the RBF strengthens incentives to realise them. Next, we have cash on delivery. Cash on delivery aid, COD. Cash on delivery aid involves a fixed payment to the government for each unit of results delivered. The unit is specified in a contract between the development partners, such as the World Bank, and the government, and is disseminated publicly for transparency. COD aid gives recipients full responsibility and discretion to use the funds. For instance, a fixed amount is paid for every student that takes a standardized competency test in their last year of primary school, or for each additional child over an enrollment baseline who takes the standardized competency. In this case, payment is proportionate to the number of predefined results delivered. COD programs involve fixed payment to the government for each unit of results. They disseminate the payment publicly for transparency, and they give recipients full responsibility and discretion in using the funds. Okay, just 2 more to go. So stick with it if you are getting acronym fatigue. I think I should patent that term, or what's a better one? I guess patenting is fine. I should assert that term. That's my term, acronym fatigue. 2 more to go. 2 more acronyms, and then we're done with looking at RBF. Conditional cash transfers, CCT. Conditional cash transfers provide cash payments to program beneficiaries, typically poor households, which meets certain desired behaviour, generally related to the use of services like children's healthcare, vaccinations, or school enrolment. Similar to OBA projects, CCT payments are made only after the target results have been achieved, which must be independently verified by a third party. CCT payments are all or nothing payments focused entirely on the demand side of services. They entail no performance risk for the service provider delivering the services, but at the same time, these cash incentives are often combined with increased services to respond to increased demand. The supplier has therefore incentives to strengthen the quality of service delivery. CCT payments provide cash to program beneficiaries they provide cash to program beneficiaries who meet desired behavior. They are all or nothing payments, and they entail no performance risk for the service provider. Finally, we have performance-based financing, PBF. Another set of financing instruments are related to performance-based indicators. The team performance tends to be used when it is easy to quantify the degree to which results have been achieved. Under this type, the recipient is the project implementer or service provider. Payment is made against the performance of service providers, measured by meeting a range of quality-based output indicators. PBF is inherent in most public-private partnerships, which are PPP, wherein a private party enters into a long-term contract with a government entity for the purpose of providing a public asset or service. In a PPP, private party bears a performance risk, and reimbursement is linked to performance. PBF programs are used when it's easy to quantify the degree to which results have been achieved. They make the recipient the project implementer or service provider, and they disperse payment based on verified performance rather than units of results delivered. So those are the various types of results-based financing according to the GPRBA. Once more, let's go from the top to the bottom. We had output-based aid firstly, then we had impact bonds, then we had a program for results, which is rather than a category, that's a specific World Bank instrument. Then we had results-based climate financing, which is a thematic form of RBF, geared towards tackling climate change. Then we had output-based disbursement, or OBD. We had cash on delivery aid, COD aid. We had conditional cash transfers, or CCT. And we had finally performance-based financing, PBF. If you want to learn more about the work of the GPRBA, which again, to add, just to finish out with these acronyms, is the Global Partnership for Results-Based Approaches. It is supported by the World Bank, and in the previous episode I talked about what it is that they do exactly and aim to do. Check out their website at gprba.org. They also have a LinkedIn page you can follow along for updates on. And finally, they have a newsletter, which I am just subscribing to as we speak. I hope this was useful, this episode of Readings in Impact Investing. If you want to get more from me, more of these episodes, readingsiниmpact.org, and please pass along the link to your colleagues. That would be most appreciated because it helps the podcast to get off the ground. We are still only, I use the we metaphorically, it's really me doing this, but the podcast is still only a few weeks old, so it really helps at this initial period. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode.